to part A. The first thing you have to do is explain if it was a maximum or minimum, and then make sure that you are specific with your explanation. So you have to say if it's a max or a min, and then explain that, because that's something that you'll have to know how to explain on your quiz. Okay, so this is a minimum. Ashley, can you tell me why? Good. So A is positive, A equals 2, and that means the graph opens which way? Yep. Okay, so the graph opens upward. Sometimes I even draw a little picture so I can say, okay, if it opens up, I have my lowest point, right? That's when I have the minimum. Okay, great. And then step 2, I'm going to find my vertex. Okay, so Lizzie, what's the first step I do to find my vertex? Good, so x equals the opposite of b over 2a. All right, and then Jack, what was our b value for this?
Just 0.
Good, how do you know?
There's no b value.
Right, your b value is always in front of your x, right? If there's no x, your b is 0. And then in this case, our a is 2, even though with our calculation, that's not going to impact. So x is 0, but remember, we are going to find the minimum value, which is the y-coordinate. So now we're going to take our 0 and plug that back into the original function. Now, sometimes when we were doing this, we plugged it back in and we get 0 again. Does that happen here? Did we get 0? Nope. What do we get? -4. So, because the x is 0, this point is not only the maximum, it's also the what? If you have 0, it's not only the, or minimum, it's not only the minimum, it's also what? Yeah, so your vertex is 0, -4. It's also your y-intercept, and then it's asking you to find out what your maximum value or minimum value is. So for this one, the minimum is just -4, okay? So you're finding the vertex because you need to find the y value of the vertex. Okay, so your minimum is always the y value of your vertex. All right, and then our last step is going to be the domain and range. Because this is quadratic, your domain does not have any restrictions. So I do want you to do this in set builder notation, and we'll specifically ask for that on your quiz. So your domain is x, such that x is an element in the real number set. And then your range should be y, such that, Julian, will you tell me what you put for this part? Good, y is greater than or equal to -4. So if it is opening up, okay, all of the points are above it, so y is greater than or equal to. Awesome. All right, now I am going to show you how you can use your graphing calculator to find your max or your minimum value. Okay, so will you have your graphing calculator out, if you have it with you? Okay, and we're just going to write down a few instructions. So on your graphing calculator, your first step you already know how to do. Maybe some of you need a refresher. You are going to enter your equation into y equals. Okay, so in your y equals, you are going to enter the equation. And then you are going to hit the graph button. pressure of that. Just going to zoom out so you guys can see this whole thing. Okay, we're going to go to y equals, and then this is g of x equals 2x squared minus 4, so we're going to do 2x squared minus 4. So 2x squared minus 4. So we plug that in if you just give me a thumbs up if you've done it already. All right, and then we're going to graph it. Now, if your graph does not have the proper window, there's only 2 buttons that you have to push. What are the 2 buttons? Yep.
Window and
Yes, you can hit window. You could also just go to zoom and then 6. Okay, so once you have your y equals, you enter your equation. Now what we're going to do is, see this trace button here? Above it, it says calc. So we want to go to the calc, which means we're going to do second. We're going to hit the second button, and then we're going to hit the trace button, because we want to calculate the minimum value. Okay, so we're going to go to second, calc, and then if it's a minimum, you're going to choose number 3. If it's a maximum, you would choose number 4. You can just push button 3, or you can go to 3 and push enter, either one. For this one, it's a minimum. Okay, if you're doing a max, go to 4. All right, so I'm just going to press 3. Now for this, you got to watch me first, so don't try to do this with me. I want you to watch me. I'm going to do it twice, and then I'm going to let you try it, okay? So the first thing your calculator asks is left bound. What it's asking you is, tell me where the left boundary is, okay? So you have a parabola. Your calculator needs to know where it should find the lowest point. So basically, you tell your calculator, look between this value on the left, look between this value on the right, and then your calculator can find the lowest point within those boundaries. Okay? So the way that I do that is I put my cursor on the center, and again, don't watch me, and then I'm going to give you time. So I put it in the center, I go 2 to the left, I press enter, I go back to my center, I go 2 to the right and press enter because it's asking me for the right side, and then it's going to ask me to guess, okay? So I'm going to take my best guess at where the vertex is, and then I'm going to press enter again, okay? And then when it says minimum, then you know that you have found it, okay? So you have 0, -4, -4 is your minimum, okay? So you're going to go to second calc, select 3, left bound, you go to the left, enter, 2 to the right, enter, enter one more time for your guess, and then it should tell you your minimum. Okay, so go ahead and try that right now. Okay, and then if you're having trouble getting that, I will help you. If you already have it, then I want you to go back to part A, and I want you to find it on your graphing calculator for part A. All right, and then I just added, you're doing left enter, you're doing right enter, you're doing your... Okay, so for part A, you haven't tried that yet, you gotta try it. So for part A, we did Our function was negative 3x squared. So if it's a negative, you have to use the negative. You cannot use the minus sign, or else you're going to get a syntax error. You can only use the minus sign if it's subtraction like this, minus 4. Okay, and then we're going to graph it. All right, and then once we graph it, we go to second. You can hit the trace button, which is calc. Now we're going to go to maximum, which is number 4, and it's going to ask me again, left bound. Okay, so I can arrow to the left, arrow to the right, and then take my best guess. And then see how it's 0.333 there? Okay, so that's close to my 1/3, and then negative 3.6 repeating, my negative 3 2/3. Okay, so that's going to be a helpful tool for you. All right, let's go to our story problem. So for example 2, it says the average height h in centimeters of a certain type of grain can be modeled by the function, and we're going to fill in that function together. So the function that's given is h of r equals 0.024. So put your decimal and then 0.24 r squared minus 1.28r plus 33.6. So that's our function, where r is the distance in centimeters between the rows in which the grain is planted. Based on this model, what is the minimum average height of the grain, and what is the row spacing that results in this height? So when I have a story problem, I like to zero in on what they're asking me. What am I trying to find? Okay, and this is where my highlighter comes in handy. So it's asking you, what is the minimum average height, and what is the row spacing that results in the height? So you're trying to find two things for this. Okay, so the first thing, what do we need to find? The minimum average height. So I'm just going to abbreviate. We have to find the minimum average height. Sorry, I wrote that kind of small. The second thing we have to find is the row spacing for that height. Okay, so the minimum average height and then the row spacing for that height. So what I like to do is go back and review what they told me about the variables. So it said the average height h is measured in centimeters. And then if I look at my function, is h my output or my input? How can I tell? Is h my output or my input? Well, it's a 50-50 shot, so let's take a swing. Is it my output or my input? Output. Okay, because look, h is on the outside. Isn't that where my y value is? What's my input going to be? R. Okay, so the average height h is going to be the output of your function, which means it is going to correspond to your y coordinate. R is the distance in centimeters. So they're both in centimeters between the rows. So that is going to be my input because I can see R in my function. So I know that's going to correspond to my x coordinate. Now, whenever they're asking you to find a minimum or a maximum, they are asking for the y-coordinate of the vertex. Okay, so how are we going to find this? We have to find the vertex. right? So your minimum value is going to be the y coordinate. And then the row spacing is going to be your x coordinate. Now there's a couple different ways that we could do this. We can use algebra. We can do the opposite of b over 2a, or we could use our graphing calculator. Okay, now if I'm trying to use my graphing calculator, this h of r, that's your y equals, I would plug in 0.24 x squared minus 1.28 x plus 33.6. So I would plug in that function, but then when I hit graph, I have to find my window. So I could play around with the window. I could just see what happens and see if I could find it that way. And you absolutely might be able to do that. Or we can use algebra to find the vertex by doing the opposite of b over 2a. And that can help you narrow down your window, right? So if I have the opposite of b, I have 1.28 over 2 times 0.024. When you do this in your calculator, though, you have to remember with a fraction, you're going to have to put parentheses around the bottom. So this is 1.28 divided by, and you have to tell your calculator that you're doing this first, or else your calculator is going to do PEMDAS from left to right. So 1.28 divided by 2 times 0.024. Okay, so now I have 26.6 repeating. So now I have an x value. This is the halfway point. So if that's the halfway point, what do you guys think I should set my window for? This is halfway. Yes. Okay, so something like 50 or 60, right? And then let's make our scale by 5s. And then with y's, you can also, again, you can just play around and guess. I know this is a real world problem, so that's why I'm starting with 0. Let's for the y's, let's try 60 as well. Let's see if that's enough. You could also plug this into your function and calculate it. Go by 5s. Yay, we can see the parabola. Okay, so again, we can use our calc feature. So second calc, this time we're finding another minimum, so we're going to go to 3. And this one, the scale is a little bit wider, so I'm going to go out a little bit more here. So I'm going to say this to the left side, because I can see my lowest point is like somewhere in here. This to my right side, and then I'm going to make my guess. And what's nice about finding this algebraically, you can say, oh yeah, look, my x is the same thing. So that makes you feel good about your y. Okay, so on my graphing calc, I got the 26.6 repeating, and then 16.53. Okay, so remember, this is going to correspond to your minimum. So it's asking you what is the minimum height of the green or the average. So we can just say the minimum average height of the green is about 16.5 centimeters. You do want to label the units for your story problem. And then the other thing they asked us is what should the row spacing be for that? And that's going to be our X. Okay, so the row spacing that results, or you could say produces, that results in the minimum average height is, and then we can round, approximately 26.7 centimeters. Okay, and then of course you could plug this value in to find your X as well. Okay, so you could substitute that in. I actually did it here, but I used my fraction of 80 over 3. Okay, and then your homework for, oh, actually, here's it. So this is where I plug this in, and I got 16.5. Okay, so your 2.2, day 2, same page as last night. Number 1, 8 through 11, 24 through 30. And have a great day.